Chapter 5. Was Ancient Sumer a Civilization? 5.1 Introduction. In the last chapter, you read about the rise of Sumerian city-states. In this chapter, you'll take a closer look at Sumerian culture. Like an archaeologist, you'll consider evidence to try to answer a question about the distant past. The question is this: was Sumer a civilization? Until about 150 years ago, archaeologists had no idea that the Sumerian people had lived at all. Then, in the mid-1800s, archaeologists began finding artifacts in the area we call Mesopotamia. They dug up tablets, pottery, and the ruins of cities. They were surprised to find writing in a language they had never seen before. By studying artifacts, archaeologists have learned a lot about Sumer. One artifact is called the Standard of Ur. It was found where the ancient city of Ur once stood. You could see the standard on the opposite page. It is made of wood and decorated with pieces of shell and lapis lazuli, a semi-precious blue stone. It shows Sumerians in times of peace and war. Artifacts like this one can tell us a great deal about daily life in ancient Sumer. We now know about the Sumerians had a complex society. Some of the things they invented, like the plow and writing, are still in use today. But can we call Sumer a civilization? Let's consider the evidence. 5.2 Characteristics of Civilization. As you learned in the last chapter, Sumer was a challenging place to live. It had hot summers, little rain, and rivers that flooded the plains. Yet the Sumerians overcame these challenges. They built complex irrigation systems and large cities. By 3000 BC, most Sumerians lived in powerful city-states like Ur, Lagash, and Uruk. But can we say the Sumerians had created a civilization? To answer this question, we need to think about what civilization means. What characteristics make a culture a civilization? Historians name several such characteristics, including these: a stable food supply, so that people of a society have the food they need to survive; a social structure with different levels of social levels and jobs; a system of government so that life in the society is orderly; a religious system, which involves a set of beliefs and forms of worship; a highly developed culture that includes arts such as painting, architecture, music, and literature; advances in technology; a highly developed written language. Did Sumer have these characteristics? Let's find out what the evidence can tell us. 5.3 Stable food supply. Civilizations need a stable food supply. A complex society can thrive only if its members have the food they need to survive. Sumerians invented two things to help them create a stable food supply. You already know about one of these inventions, their complex irrigation systems. The Sumerians built networks of canals, dams, and reservoirs to provide their crops with a regular supply of water. Their second invention was the plow. A plow is a tool for tilling or turning the soil to prepare it for planting. Before the plow was invented, farmers used animal horns or pointed sticks to poke holes in the earth. Then they would plant seeds in the holes. This was a very slow way to farm. Farmers needed a faster way to prepare the land for farming. The Sumerians made the first plow out of wood. One end was bent for cutting into the ground to turn the soil. Farmers pushed and pulled the plow along the ground themselves, or they used animals such as oxen to pull it. 5.4 Social structure. Civilizations have a complex organization or social structure. A social structure includes different jobs and social levels. People at higher levels have greater status than others. Archaeologists have found evidence that several classes of people lived in Sumer. At the top was an upper class, which included priests, landowners, and government officials. These people had the largest and most luxurious homes near the center of the city. Their houses were 2 stories high. Evidence suggests that they had whitewashed mud walls. In the middle was the common class. This included merchants and craftspeople. The craftspeople included highly skilled metal workers. They worked with such metals as gold, silver, tin, lead, copper, and bronze. With these materials, they made swords and arrowheads for the army. They made tools like plows and hoes for farmers. They also made luxury items such as mirrors and jewelry for the upper class. The common class also included farmers and fishermen. They lived in small, mud brick houses at the edge of the city. Farmers often worked to build or repair the irrigation systems. In times of war, they were also forced to serve in the army. At the very bottom of the social structure were slaves. They lived in their own owners' homes and had no property of their own. 5.5. Government. All civilizations have a system of government to direct people's behavior and make life orderly. Sumerian city-states were ruled by kings. The Sumerians believed that their kings were chosen by the gods to rule in their place. This belief made their kings very powerful. It also helped strengthen the social order, since Sumerians believed they must obey the will of the gods. Sumerian kings enforced the laws and collected taxes. They built temples and made sure irrigation systems were maintained. A king also led his city-state's army. All the city-states needed armies because they were constantly fighting over land boundaries and the use of water. Leading the army was one of the king's most important jobs. A Sumerian army included both professional soldiers and temporary citizen soldiers. Some were foot soldiers, others drove chariots, wheeled vehicles pulled by horses. Kings had officials under them to help them with their duties. Governors ruled over outlying towns. Scribes helped record laws. The Sumerians were the first people to develop a system of written laws. One special group of officials patrolled the canals. They looked for damage and made sure farmers didn't take water illegally. 5.6. Religion. All civilizations have a religious system. A religious system includes a set of beliefs, usually in a god or gods, together with forms of worship. In Sumer, religious beliefs influenced every part of daily life. Sumerians tried to please the gods in all things, from growing crops to settling disputes. Religion bound them together in a common way of life. Sumerians expressed their religious beliefs by building temples and religious towers called ziggurats. It was the king's duty to build and maintain the ziggurats. The towers were made of mud bricks and located near temples. They were so large that they could be seen for 20 miles away. Some were as high as 8 stories and as wide as 200 feet. The Sumerians believed that the gods lived in the ziggurats, and they built special temples at the top for them. Outside the ziggurat, they attached a long staircase so the gods could climb down to earth. Kings and priests stood inside the towers to ask for the gods' blessings. Sumerian statues also expressed their religious beliefs. Many of these statues were detailed and lifelike. They showed people worshipping the gods, often with their eyes gazing upward. The Sumerians believed that the gods were pleased when people showed them the devotion or love and obedience. Sumerians also had many kinds of religious ceremonies. Often musicians played at these ceremonies. Some ceremonies may have involved human sacrifice, the ritual killing of a person as an offering to the gods. 5.7. The arts. All civilizations have a highly developed culture, including the arts. Arts include creative forms of expression such as painting, architecture, and music. There were many kinds of artists and craftspeople in Sumer. Sumerian metalworkers made practical objects, like weapons and cups. They also made decorative items, such as mirrors and jewelry. Sumerian architects designed temples and ziggurats. Music was another important art in Sumer. The Sumerians believed that music brought joy to the gods and people alike. Musicians played instruments and sang during temple ceremonies. They wrote love songs and entertained guests at feasts. Musicians played many instruments, including drums and pipes. One favorite was a small harp called a lyre. Lyres were wooden instruments made of a sound box and strings. A wooden bar held the strings in place at the top. Lyre makers often decorated their instruments with precious stones and carvings made of horn. These decorations show how much the Sumerians valued music. 5.8. Technology. All civilizations create new forms of technology, or practical tools and inventions. The Sumerians made several technological advances. The Sumerians' most important invention was the wheel. The earliest examples of the wheel date back to 3500 BC. Sumerian potters or pottery makers used wheels as a surface for shaping clay into pots. Potters' wheels spun, flat side up, on an axle. Sumerians discovered that a wheel that was flipped onto its edge could be rolled forward. They used this discovery to create wheeled carts for farmers and chariots for the army. They built the wheels by clamping pieces of wood together. It would be hard to imagine a more powerful invention than the wheel. Before the wheel, people had to drag their goods on flat-bottom carts called sledges. The sledges often got stuck in mud and they couldn't support heavy loads. Wheeled carts made it much easier to move goods over long distances. Oxen could pull 3 times more weight on wheeled carts than they could on sledges. Another technological advance was the ark. Sumerian arches were inverted or upside-down U or V-shaped structures built above doorways. To build arches, the Sumerians stacked bricks made of clay and straw so that they rose in steps from the walls until they met in the center. Arches added strength and beauty to Sumerian buildings. They became a common feature of temple entrances and upper-class homes. Some historians say the arch is the Sumerians' greatest architectural achievement. 5.9 Writing. A final characteristic of civilizations is a highly developed written language. Sumerians created a written language called cuneiform. This name comes from the Latin word for wedge. The Sumerians used a wedge-shaped stylus, a sharp-pointed tool, to etch their writing in clay tablets. Sumerians developed cuneiform around 2400 BC. The earliest examples of cuneiform show that it was used to record information about the goods Sumerians exchanged with one another. At first, they may have used as many as 2,000 symbols to stand for ideas and sounds. Over time, they were able to reduce this number to about 700. Cuneiform was based on the earlier, simpler form of writing that used pictographs. Pictographs are symbols that stand for real objects, such as snake or water. Scribes drew the symbols with a sharpened reed on wet clay. When the clay dried, the marks became permanent record. 5.10 Chapter Summary. Was Sumerian culture a civilization? It had all the characteristics you read about at the start of this chapter. The people of Sumer created a stable food supply. Their society had a complex social structure. They had a system of government headed by kings. They had a religious system with priests, temples, and ziggurats. They had highly developed arts, technologies, and written language. For these reasons, historians call Sumer one of the world's first civilizations. Sumerian civilization lasted about 1,500 years, from 3500 to 2000 BC. What happened to the Sumerians? What new cultures developed in Mesopotamia? In the next chapter, you'll find out.